Are we actually here? Hello? It looks like I'm sounding like I'm doing things, but I can't tell if I'm actually sounding like I'm doing things. That is a great question for philosophers. Okay, so here's the deal. We're going to do what we can with what we have, and it might not be a lasting situation, and this thing might crash. Who knows? Like a minute from now. Can't promise anything. Comcast sucks. Um, but yeah, let's. I guess we'll get what we can get, and depending on how far we get, we'll do what we can. And if it crashes, we might push, and if we do something else, who knows? But welcome everybody. Hello, puppy. Don't really. Well, I guess we should always have time for the puppy. Come on, puppy. Come here. Come see me. Come here. Come on. Yes, we should always have puppy time. Oh, yes. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. We should always make time for the puppy. Oh, yes. Thank you for the sugars. Oh, my goodness. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Yes. That's a good girl. So much better than Comcast. Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yeah, Comcast is still a company. They just rebranded as Xfinity. So if you have Xfinity for internet service, you actually have Comcast. The issue was that Comcast as a company was getting horrible reviews, and for about a decade in a row, it was the worst customer service rated company in America, and it was costing them business. So they rebranded and called themselves Xfinity, but it's still the same company. Still the same company, still the same people, and now less customer service. So yeah, good times. So let's say hello to everybody. Kyle, good to see you. KP, hello. Nick Slottle, thank you so much for the subscription. It is, as always, appreciated. I apologize if I'm a little bit flustered. It really is frustrating. We pay way too much money for a service to be so poor, and unfortunately, this really is effectively the only option that we have at the moment. Raveland, good to see you. Green Herring, we got to see some great birds this morning. Doc's stream this morning was great. I really had a good time. I got to see some things on his stream that I had personally never seen in my life, and that's always fun. Do we spend $500 million fixing the problems, or $500 million branding? Yeah, pretty much, right? Viper's good to see you. Yeah, those, especially like the plovers and the sandpipers and the dowitchers and those birds, that I will contend that they are just as difficult, if not more difficult, in certain cases to identify than sparrows. Sparrows are just ridiculously hard to get because they're all like, which one's the small one with like the brown and the light khaki markings, and you're just like, everyone? And a lot of those shorebirds are the same way, and you really sort of have to see them beside each other to tell which one is which, and it's messy. So yeah, I'm really bad at sparrows, so that's sort of my kryptonite zone. Moose, good to see you. Greetings from Central Florida. Indeed. We are in the 10th century, so we are year 900 to year 1000. We'll be specifically looking at China. You should show me the GRFTC room from... I have no idea what all of these things mean except for Coast Guard Base NOLA. But anyway, wait till you learn about impid flycatchers. I mean, some of the flycatchers are pretty easy. You know, like your scissotail or your swallowtail. Like peewees are flycatchers, right? And great crested flycatcher. That one's pretty easy to identify. They sing a lot too, so that makes it a lot easier. You can. Anyway, we're getting off in birds, and we don't really have time to do. I could talk about birds a lot. I've become quite interested in seeing and viewing and all of the bird things. Gulf Regional Fisheries Training Center. Ah, I see. Gotcha. Cool. All right. Let's get some China while we still have internet, and we will hope that we can get all the way through this. But if not, we'll do what we can. I appreciate that we have common ground, though, Korean Herring. I really like that. And one day maybe we can make our way up to the eastern seaboard and we could go birding together. I know that there are some pretty neat areas that are on the Potomac just north of DC that have a lot of good habitat. They get kind of swampy right around in there. So I know that there are areas up in that realm that would be great to go see, and maybe we can get the fates to align and go out together. I think that would be great. I'd always love to go down and see Doc. There are so many like minor little pockets of habitat down there that, you know, the only place you'll ever see this bird on the continental United States is in that southern part of Florida. Anyway, we're getting back off on birds again. Let's talk about China. Now, our story tonight begins with the Tang Dynasty. And we have been talking about the Tang Dynasty for a long time, right? We've been talking about them since the 600s when they first got started, and it's now the 900s. So they've had a long run of things, but not everything lasts forever, and they're not going to make it out of the century. Spoiler alert. I guess it's not necessarily a spoiler because I'm about to tell you the story itself. All right, so if we look at what the Song Dynasty was, you can see that it still has quite a bit of territory. Now, I'm sorry, the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty had lost a lot of land, especially land here in Central Asia and land down here in the southeast. Oh, I'm sorry, this would be southwest. I apologize. They had lost a lot of land here along the border. Some of this territory had gone over into Tibet, but it's still sizable. However, this particular image is a bit misleading, and there's a reason for that. Because the Tang Dynasty is actually rather weak, and the guy that's in charge of it, I don't know why I went back over. I should have just stayed on the images thing here. This is the emperor at the time. His name is Zhaozong. And Zhaozong is really not what we would call a functioning emperor. He had been put on the throne by a bunch of court eunuchs. If you've been around us talking about the Tang Dynasty, you'll know that there is a faction of eunuchs that had become increasingly powerful in especially the capital and especially inside the palace. And these eunuchs were effectively ruling the country at the time, and Zhaozong was particularly weak. He had been put on the throne, and the country itself was also weak because of two very, very large rebellions. We talked about those in previous streams. You can go back and check those out if you want to watch the VODs. But the country was in bad shape, and the real power in the country is not in the hands of the emperor. It is in the hands of a bunch of warlords. And specifically, there are a lot of these warlords that are not actually Chinese. So some of these are from outside of the Han Chinese world that had been sort of brought in as a friend, as a way to try to create some sort of bridge with the border territories where the ethnic mix was not particularly in favor of Han Chinese. But these particular warlords were not particularly inclined to listen very much to the emperor. And if we look at what the country really looked like, the country really looked like this. Now, this is the same territory, but you can tell that there are a lot of things going on that was not necessarily evident by the first map that I showed you. There are a lot of people that have power in China. And specifically, these people in the center part of the country, these... Wow! Dun 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 dun! Lurking party. Well, that sounds like one of the fun kinds of parties. You just hang around and be quiet and do your thing. Lurking party, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome to the adventure. Feel free to participate at whatever level you feel comfortable. But you see that we have several of these really big players. These guys like Wang Jian and Ma Yin and Yang Xingmi, but specifically this guy right here, whose name is Zhu Wen. This guy is a big deal. So here, nope, that's not him. That's a little bit of a later picture. Anyway, SpongeBob, what's up? Good to see you. How's it going? Anyway, the country's in bad shape. And the Tang Dynasty is not really running the show. But I mentioned this guy, and he'll be an important figure here for the next few minutes of our stream. So, who was this guy to begin with? Well, he was one of these generals in the military that had power because the government was falling apart and it needed strong people to hold territory. Now, there were political leaders in the area, right? There were governors, the provincial governors that were appointed by the emperor, who were actually appointed by a lot of the eunuchs. But then you had the military leaders that had been given military rule zones, effectively, over parts of the country, and this guy has a lot of them. And he had been part of some of the other earlier rebellions and had eventually decided to support the Tang Dynasty. He got bought off a couple of times. But in 901, he is going to begin open rebellion against the emperor. Now, how is he going to accomplish this? So first off, he recognizes that the emperor is not actually the one that's running the country. It's these eunuchs that are in the capital city. So, how do you handle that situation? Well, Zhu Wen makes an arrangement with another one of these warlords and goes down to the capital city and sort of forces his way into the palace, and he kills all of the eunuchs. And he's not really nice about how he does this. It's a pretty brutal force kind of thing that he's doing here. He's definitely making a political statement that they are not in charge anymore. And of course we know that it's hard to be in charge with military rebellions running around the country, but it's also very difficult to be in charge when you're dead. And his purging of the eunuchs was actually rather complete. The only ones that managed to How does he know which ones are eunuchs? Well, there are ways to tell. But most specifically, these people had managed to put themselves into political positions. There had been some law reforms several centuries back that allowed them to adopt, which was a way to effectively make their positions hereditary, even though they weren't having kids themselves. They could adopt people that became their heirs, that allowed them to pass down money and wealth and power. And a lot of the high-ranking government officials' positions were these eunuchs. And so he went in and he just killed them all, just wiped them out. Now, by itself, that was a remarkable step towards taking over the country, because that then left him as the most powerful individual in China, if you really wanted to just look at it on paper. And he's going to play a little bit of a political game for a little while. He had, I mentioned this earlier, but he had been part of some rebellions, but then ended up being kind of brought back over to the side of the Tang Emperor. And when he kills all the eunuchs, he thinks, well, this guy's already weak. This Zhao Zong guy, he's not really running the show anyway. He's not really used to running the country, so I'll step in and I'll be the one that runs the country. Right? If in doubt, just kill them all. Right? Just kill them all. So for a few years, he decides to allow Zhao Zong to continue being emperor. Out of courtesy, out of convenience, you can call it whatever you want to, but by 904, he had sort of realized that there were problems with allowing this guy to stay on the throne. So he needs to get rid of the emperor. And how do you do that? Well, you kick him out of the capital city and you exile him to a pretty far away part of the country. And then after he's out of the public eye, you have him killed. So Zhaozong, emperor, kicked out, exiled, then assassinated. And as a way to play a little bit of kingmaker himself, Zhuyin is going to find another member of the royal family and put him on the throne, and this guy becomes the last emperor of the Tang dynasty, Emperor Ai. And this again is in 904, but Emperor Ai is directly a puppet, right? Yeah, exactly. Out of the public eye, nobody cares. Go ahead and kill him, right? So when he puts Emperor Ai on the throne, Zhuyin is again exercising his power. But there are a lot of people that don't like particularly Zhuyin being in power, because there are a lot of people that were offended by his moves. There were a lot of people that were upset with him being in charge. There were a lot of people that didn't like him specifically as a person. The Disney Mulan is during the Ming Dynasty. Is that during this time? Eris, no, this is the Tang Dynasty. So the Ming Dynasty is about 400 years after this. We're going to go through a few dynasties to get there. We're going to have the Song Dynasty, which is going to show up at the end of the 900s and continue through until the 1100s. And then they're going to be conquered by the Mongolians, who established the Yuan Dynasty of China, and they rule for about 100 or so years before China kicks them back out. And then there's a little bit of kind of arguing and posturing inside of China, and then we end up with the Ming Dynasty. So there's about 400-ish years between here and there. But it's a fair question, after a fair question. But it's also good to see you, Eris the Cat Goddess. Hope that you are doing well. After Mongolia, they were the Dynasty. Dinsesti. I don't get the joke. I'm sorry. As in past tense, they were the Song, and then they got beaten and conquered, and then they were the Sang Dynasty. So it's past tense of them. I get it. Okay. I caught up. It took me a little while, but I caught up. Anyway, Juwen is not popular. He doesn't like the idea that there are so many of these people that speak out against him. And a lot of these people are these heads of noble houses that had been in positions for a long time. He was not particularly beholden to those people, whereas a lot of the power structures that had existed prior to Juwen showing up had integrated a lot of these noble families into the larger tapestry of power. And now here he comes, and he doesn't really care about any of these groups. He's already killed all the eunuchs. He doesn't really care about the imperial family. And he doesn't really care about the nobility either. And when he puts Ai on the throne, a lot of these noble families just really, really start openly calling for rebellion against him, or prosecution, or exile, or some sort of punishment for Juwen. And his response is, I'm going to kill all of the leaders of your families. And so he calls together about 30 heads of these noble families, and he kills all of them. Because he's a warlord. Warlord's going to be lording, right? And so he murders a lot of the leading family members of the Chinese nobility. And what's really interesting here is this really does solidify his position as effectively despot, right? But he ends up causing a lot of instability, because it turns out that a lot of these nobles were part of the people kind of keeping the wheels on the vehicle here, right? There ought to be a law against that. What's up, Frank? Good to see you. There is a law against murder today, but he's again a warlord and doesn't really care. He is the law, right? And in 907, Juwen just decides, I'm tired of playing. I just want to be emperor myself. So he's going to force Ai to give up the throne, and then exiles Ai. And then the next year, in 908, he has Ai poisoned. And this means that he's going to have his own dynasty now. Had to sneeze, and it was rather sudden. Were they in Mega City? They were not in Mega City, but he was the law. I'm glad somebody got that. Thanks, Moose. Anyway, so Juwen is going to establish himself as the head of a new dynasty. He refers to his dynasty as the later Liang dynasty. And while it is a very important political group, it's only going to be around for about another 17 years or so. It ends in the 720s. I don't even know if it actually makes 17 years at this point. It's like, I think it's 626 or 623 something when they all fall apart. Anyway, when Juwen kills the emperor, China falls apart. And this period is known, historically even, as the period of 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. So even in history, when you read about this period of time in Chinese history, they refer to it as the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. So you're already clearly figuring out that this is not a unified point in Chinese history. What's up, Uncle Bill? Suddenly, three kingdoms doesn't sound so bad, right? Or even the warring states where there were 10 kingdoms doesn't sound so bad because we've got 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. And what's really crazy about it, if you're trying to be really accurate, there were more than 10 kingdoms. There were just only a maximum of 10 kingdoms at one time. There were about 15 kingdoms total, but they rose and fell really fast. It gets really, really confusing. The good thing for us, to save us some time and some brain space, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these and describe all of them in detail and show you maps of how they rose and fell and conquered and did all of this stuff. I'll put it blankly and bluntly. This is one of the most confusing periods of Chinese history. If you are an actual scholar of Chinese history, this is the senior seminar that you dread going to, because while everything is constantly in motion, there are actually quite a few things that happen during this period that are very important. And if you're going to read a history book of China, this is probably going to have a chapter to itself, or at least a significant portion of a chapter to itself, because this period of time is really going to be one of the last big times that China falls completely apart, because what comes out of this is a really big shift of culture and politics and ideology. Question: how much of China has been made up of rural areas inhabited by people who didn't give a fig who was in charge? At this point, that is most of China. Prior to what comes out of this period of time, especially the northern part of China, this sort of big northern plain up here, is mostly farmland. There are a few cities. Of course, there are going to be, some capital cities, provincial locations, but the provincial capitals aren't really on par with something like the imperial capital. It would be similar to today, where you go to the capital city of our state and there's some stuff there that's kind of neat, but you can go to another city, one state over, that's not the capital, and there's cooler stuff, because our state's just a rural state. So even our capital city isn't going to be what we would consider a big, sprawling, metropolitan urban zone, right? A lot of these states were very rural. Now, when you talk about who cares, that's actually a little bit of a harder question to answer, because you're going to always know sort of who's in charge, but a lot of the rulers aren't going to seem any different until you get to periods like this, where there are going to be big differences between some of these dynasties and some of these states, most notably with how they run the law, who they want to be involved in the military, because most of the military of all of these emperors and kings and dynasty rulers and warlords are going to be made up of peasant soldiers. So in that sense, you absolutely do care, because you're going to want the lord that's going to leave you alone to be in charge. But when it comes to the individual, what we might call the nitty-gritty of politics, a lot of these people's lives aren't particularly going to change one way or the other when one brother kills his brother to take the throne, or when a warlord kills the emperor and puts another emperor on the throne. That sort of stuff doesn't necessarily affect the average person in China very much. But when the country falls apart and politically splinters into 15 different political entities, that is going to have a big effect on the average person. Love will tear us apart again. Ian Curtis, who died on this date in 1980. If you don't give a feather or a fig, maybe you were born in the year of the pig. There we go. You would think that in a lot of these areas, by the time they found out who's in charge, someone else is in charge. That's quite possible as well, because it does take a while for a lot of these despots to change over the existing structure. Because again, we don't have instantaneous communication. So if I take over the empire, I've got to send runners out or riders out with news to the far-flung corners of the empire to let them know that they're not swearing allegiance to the old emperor anymore. They're supposed to be swearing allegiance to me. And then I probably am going to have to summon the rulers of all these areas to the capital to do obeisance to me. And if they don't impress me with their groveling, kill them and then send somebody back, which might take months or half a year, right? Or if it gets interrupted by winter, maybe a whole year. So a lot of these people's lives are going to be affected by this stuff much more when it's violent and much less when things are good, which I guess sort of works for us today as well. Meet the new despot, just like the old despot, right? Or when Hulk Hogan body slams Andre the Giant, they don't know or care. That's true, except that did happen, and it was a big deal, right? It was a big deal. Sorry about the tangent, but which dynasty was the time of the greatest technological advancement? We're coming up on that, Moose. We're coming up on that in just a bit. Things are about to get really, really interesting by the end of the stream tonight, assuming the internet holds out. That's modern technology that we're going to hold on to, right? And you should never apologize for tangents. Tangents are welcome here. This is the home of the free tangent, right? If people get tired of the tangent, they'll get me back online with get on with it, and we can make progress from there. But never feel bad about asking questions like that, ever. Just to give you the quick answer, the Song Dynasty is really, really important. And it's, okay, I'll be honest, it's my favorite dynasty. That reminds me of the Discord discussion about empire size being limited by the speed of communication. It absolutely is, Uncle Bill. It really is. And one of the reasons why stuff like infrastructure was such a big deal is because it aids in things like communication. The Roman road system was not just for people moving goods around. It was for moving messages around and for moving the military around, right? Even our modern highway system, if we're really, really being honest and looking at the particulars of how the modern highway system was built in the United States under Eisenhower, it's still got military in mind. Because if you look at highways, I can't remember the exact measurement. So this is me attempting to recall something. So there's something like this, but I don't know if it's exactly 100% this. But something like 1 out of every 20 miles of highway has to be perfectly straight, so that it might be able to be used as a landing strip. I can't remember exactly what the measurement is, but that's something that was built into the highway system or interstate system here in America. And let's not forget that Eisenhower was a military leader as well, which makes sense long term, right? Okay, so what's going on broad scale during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period? So much. First off, everybody gets a kingdom, right? It's look under your chair, and you get a kingdom, and you get a kingdom, and everybody gets a kingdom. Now, there are going to be very big differences between the types of kingdoms that get set up, and this is mostly going to be split geographically. So if we look at, again, the big river systems in China, these are going to be more than just physical boundaries during this period of time. There are also going to be a lot of cultural boundaries that get set up. And the northern part of China here is going to be much more varied and much more non-Han Chinese ethnic group leadership in this region. Southern China is going to be more what we might consider traditional Chinese. That's not necessarily the right word for it. They're going to be more Han ethnically. They're going to be more akin to previous governing styles of China in the past. And they're going to have art and architecture that's going to look more like the China of the past. These northern kingdoms up here are going to start really changing, in some cases fairly dramatically. There are going to be big groups of people that aren't Han Chinese that move into this zone. You're going to see people that are from the Khitan Empire. We talked about them last Thursday. The Liao dynasty gets set up a little bit after this. Well, I mean, it's during this period of time that they get set up. But there's going to be some Khitan people that come down in this area. There are going to be Korean people in the northern part of China right here. There are going to be really big influxes. What's the plural of flux? Influxes, I guess. I don't like that word, though. Anyway, there are big migrations. How about that? We'll just change the word. Of Turkic peoples into especially this northwestern portion of China. And specifically the Shadou Turks are going to, this is S-H-A-T-O-U, or T-U-O, S-H-A-T-U. I guess, hey, I've got a notepad here that I can type on. So if you want to look these up. This group is going to be really, really important. They're going to end up running a lot of the kingdoms and at least two of the dynasties up here for a little while. They're really important, and they're going to bring their culture with them here from the steppe. There are going to be Uyghurs in this area that are going to have influence. There are going to be some Tibetan people that are going to be here along the border, important. Let's briefly remember that Tibet at this point was no longer a unified empire. It had splintered during the 800s. So there are political operatives in this zone that see opportunity in China falling apart. So you start seeing a little bit of crossover here. Basically what I'm getting at is the northern part of China is going to diversify quite a bit, but the southern part of China is almost going to double down on their Chineseness, if you follow my drift there. And that's going to be really important. Also, there are going to be lots of wars. There are going to be big battles. There are going to be armies marching around all of the time. And what this is going to do, of course, is have a big impact on the population. Britannica says the plural is influxes. Yeah, I got there eventually, but I just don't like that word. It sounds weird in my ears. Influxes. No. Anyway, so with all of this turmoil caused by these wars, you're going to see some really interesting stuff happen here. Most notably, you're going to see a lot more cooperation between non-Chinese leaders and Chinese leaders. So when I say Chinese here, I'm talking ethnically Han Chinese. And in previous iterations of Chinese governments, there were lots of people that were very, very hesitant towards making deals with some of these non-Chinese entities because it legitimized them, right? It gave them some version of recognition that you are a treaty signatory with a Chinese political government. And that's going to have to go by the wayside. In the world, especially of the northern part of China during this period, you don't survive without working with people that are different than you. And that is something that's pretty new and pretty interesting. I don't blame you. It feels clumsy to me as well. Yeah, I feel you. Invent a new plural. Influxes. No, that well, see, the IX is different than the UX. That's the kicker. Vowels are important and have have impacts on how things get pluralized. Influxes honestly sounds so much worse than influxes. Influxes sounds like something that you catch after a really bad encounter with somebody that you met on Tinder when you were drunk. Got a bad case of influxes. Influce. Oh, that's horrible too. Because that's crossing the streams. Anyway. We can't make it worse, right? There are things we can do. Oh, I love you all. Influxen. Yeah, that's the German plural. Influxen. So how's influxes sound? It still sounds weird. But it is better than the alternative, right? Anyway, let's get on with it. We're going to have more cooperation in areas between non-ethnic Chinese people and ethnic Chinese people. And that's a big switch over. And when that starts happening, it becomes much more common for a lot of these places to, I guess, kind of adopt more of a pluralist cultural model. Because you might be in an area that has 5 or 6 different sizable minority populations, and nobody might be in the plurality situation. You know, everybody might be 25 to 30%, so nobody's got the majority of the population. And that creates a different sort of environment, right? China. Yes, indeed. Now you're just poking at me. I'm going to let it go. Anyway, so another thing that happens, the legitimacy of anybody calling themselves emperor is pretty much shot. The old Chinese concept of the mandate of heaven, meaning that, you know, one person is chosen by heaven to rule all of China, that doesn't work during this time. There are people that say, you know, I have the mandate of heaven, but you can't really claim that when there are 4 other emperors and 10 people out there calling themselves king. It doesn't work. What's really interesting is that sometimes there are actual arrangements between some of these rulers where they are put in a weird position diplomatically where they have to admit that this other person is also an emperor while they themselves call themselves emperor, and they make these weird agreements where they agree to split the mandate of heaven. Like, okay, well, if heaven can choose one person, sometimes it can choose 2 people. And I've been chosen, and also this other person that just happens to be another emperor in this other dynasty that I can't conquer because of political arrangements or military arrangements. They're also co-emperor, but we're still ruling with the mandate. And it's weird. If someone asks if you're a god, you just say yes, right? Just say yes. Exactly. I appreciate the Ghostbusters reference. Word Hippo says that in most contexts, influx is already plural. It's going to be kind of like fish versus fishes. Interesting. I don't like that either. I totes have the mandate of heaven. Can I rule now? If you can get another entity to sign a treaty stating that they believe you are co-mandate of heaven holder, sure, Green Herring, you go for it. But the idea of one emperor is going to degrade substantially. Hey, you gotta stop chewing on your leg. I can hear the puppy chewing on her leg, and she's already chewed a hot spot on her leg, and we're trying to we need to get her the allergy medicine again, I guess. Anyway, so one emperor to rule them. Except there wasn't. There were at times 4 or 5. So it's just a big mess. There is also a significant breakdown of legal codes. Now, the Tang Dynasty, all the way back in the 600s and through the 700s and even into the 800s, had established different versions of legal codes. And some big ones in the 700s had lasted for almost 200 years. But with different rulers, and especially when the borders are changing very frequently because of all these wars and kingdoms rising and falling and dynasts falling and getting replaced and all of this stuff, the legal codes became a very big mess. And in some of these places, this kind of gets back to the question that Brittany asked earlier. Nobody really knew what the law was, which of course means that it's going to be hard to enforce the law, which also means that there are going to be lots of abuses. The common person is going to see more attacks from brigands. You're going to run into situations where you have local, mayor level rulers that just sort of set up their own little states and don't pay taxes anymore and become kind of warlords in their own right. It just gets messy because there's so much tumult, right? You're going to start seeing big population shifts. So Sauron was onto something. Too many rulers, too much mess. Well, you create multiple rulers and you recognize all of them and you get them to fight to weaken them all, and then you pick the ones that you want to enslave, who are the strongest ones, and then you enslave the strongest ones. This is what happened with men, right? 9 rings to mortal men destined to die, but except for the Ringwraiths. But they were kings that Sauron had used against other kings of men to, destroy the Northern Kingdom, to wreak havoc in places like Rohan. I can't get off on that tangent, but Tolkien knew what he was talking about. I've been doing a lot of Tolkien research lately. Lots. Anyway, so there's going to be a lot of death because of war, because of violence, but there's also going to be a lot of moving around. And especially in the north, there are going to be some really weird developments here. You might think if everybody is fighting all over the place, you probably wouldn't want to live in a city because cities are targets. But what's really interesting is that when these individual kingdoms pop up, they need capital cities. And especially in the north, where there had not been very many big cities so far, there are going to be imperial palaces built, and there are going to be big metropolitan cities established. And these big cities are going to want things like luxury items. They're going to want things like art. They're going to want things like good food. So there are going to be shifts in some of the trade routes. And instead of things getting sent kind of down into the middle part and in the southern part of China, a lot of those are going to get diverted out here into the north because all of these rulers are going to want cool things that come off the Silk Road. These are going to be your Central Asian goods or, stuff as far away as the Byzantine Empire. Because everybody wants the cool stuff, because that's how you establish your legitimacy. Look at all the cool stuff that I have, right? And this is going to change the population in the north fairly dramatically. And while a lot of people like to point out the destruction that this period caused, people were still doing art, which is not necessarily something that happens in a lot of time periods where you see lots of war. There was still a lot of building going on during this time period. There was still a lot of pottery and luxury items being made during this time to fuel the courts of all of these different leaders. So you move out of cities that were destroyed and you move into these new cities, or you move from the rural areas into these cities because your area got burned down or you got run off of your land by some new person. Anyway, you just might think that this area would be a time period of absolute financial collapse. And in some places that was true, but overall, the trade still moved and the spice still flowed. So it's very interesting that we have so much chaos, but also economic growth and things like, luxury trade good still moving around. Culturally speaking, again, the northern part of China is going to have a lot of differentiation. There's going to be a whole bunch of different people up here. There are going to be lots of people that are encountering new people groups, new ideas. We're going to get influxes of different types of art, and you're going to get influxes of different types of religion. Buddhism is actually going to spread out of this area quite a bit faster. When some of these steppe people that are coming out of Central Asia get over into China and have political stakes in the ground, some of the Chinese stuff is going to get siphoned back into Central Asia, and you're going to see a really interesting spread of Buddhism into Central Asia during this time. Could that have been because they relied upon bartering rather than a central currency? That's part of it as well, because in a lot of these places, money itself wasn't really... Okay, so how do I even say this, economically speaking? There were some attempts by some kingdoms to maintain some level of existing common currency, but in a lot of these situations, it did sort of turn into bartering against basic values of known substances. Your mediums of exchange are going to come back into play significantly more than other items. Now, when you have coins that are made out of species, stuff like silver or gold, those are going to have value regardless of where they are because of the weight, right? So people are going to take a gold coin regardless of where you are because they're going to put it on a scale next to the gold that they use, and eventually they'll get back to where they came from and they'll trade that in for coins of theirs to some central government office that's a mint, right? So nobody's going to refuse a coin that is actually made out of metal that is valuable. But the issues that we run into are debasing the coinage, which of course happens when economic problems happen throughout history. Instead of your coin being 100% gold, you end up having a coin that's 80% gold or 70% gold, and it still looks gold, but it isn't 100% gold. And some of the coins do get debased, but bartering is going to definitely be a thing. Paper money, as we understand it today, which is like fiat currency and stuff like that, had not really been fully established anywhere in the world yet. So most of the money that they were using was still going to be good to a certain extent, right? Because it's still going to be precious metals. What's up, Lumpy? Good to see you. We'll get to paper money, though, in not too long, because the Song Dynasty is one of the first governments that institutes that. It's not this century, it's next century, but there we go.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
JMR Killer. Welcome in, my friend. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for that subscription. And yes, JMR loves the Chonky Horse, and rightfully so. It is a beautiful and wonderful emote, right? The Song Dynasty wrote "Mo Money, Mo Problems," right? Not directly, but they wrote the original tune to it, and then it was sampled later during the hip hop era of America. Can I mandate a quail rave? The new bed emote in Twitch, yeah. All right. Thanks again, JMR, and I hope that you're doing well, my friend. It's good to see you. The new best emote. I see. Gotcha. All right. So culturally speaking, in the North, there's a lot of room for new ideas. Whereas previously, Han Chinese culture had been expected, right? It was something that was desired. If you were going to claim legitimacy inside of the Tang Dynasty, you wanted to look Chinese. You wanted to speak and write and dress and act Chinese, right? But with this fall apart of the central identity, a lot of new areas kind of open up to new concepts. And that's going to be something that spurs a lot of interesting developments. Now, down in the South, of course, what's happening is a little bit different. And specifically, down in the southern part, they're really going to be working on kind of solidifying what it means to be Chinese. And the southern dynasties and a couple of the southern kingdoms are really going to sort of entrench themselves and what we might consider solidify tradition of how they viewed themselves. And one of the things that they look at, there's actually quite a bit of negative connotation directed towards the North during this time as being just a bunch of barbarians, right? Look at all these other people claiming that they're running China. They're not actually running China. They're not Chinese. And there's a lot of ethnic, what we might call, it's not racism because our concept of race isn't what they would have called race, but there's a lot of negative assessment of how a lot of the people up in the North are doing stuff. Like, they're not doing things the Chinese way. We're doing things the Chinese way down here. And because of that, we need to make sure that we're just Chinesing the heck out of stuff. And we need to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And when people start asking themselves, well, what does make us Chinese? Then they start solidifying these concepts in their mind. And again, this is a very, very important moment because they have to kind of figure out what is the stereotype, right? What is the prototype of being a good Chinese person during this time period, right? Obviously, we're going to go with knows the language, writes the language. Ethnic nationalism is actually a great word there, Foggage. Social discrimination works as well, Tropical. And good to see both of you, Tropical Geek and Foggage Green. Good to see you in. Just Chinese harder, right? So what do you do when you do that? And how do you do that the best? And the reason that this is so important is because this guy is about to show up. Still working some. Oh, well, I hope that you get off of work soon, my friend, and lurk away. You're always welcome to hit the lurk when you need it, right? Now, who is this guy? Well, his name by birth is Zhao Kuanying. Good gracious, it's hard to even say this. Zhao Kuangyin. My brain doesn't like saying that because dyslexia. Anyway, Kuang Yin. I'm going to call him Taizu because it's just easier. And that's what he starts going by in just a second anyway, so it's okay. Well, so his last, well, I guess his given name is Kuang Yin. And that, I wish I could explain what that does to my brain when I try to look at it. Taizu. Who is he? Well, he's that guy that I just showed you. he was a general in one of the southern dynasties, specifically later Zhou. Bad brain wrinkle. Yeah, it doesn't sit well with me. I've tried to explain the dyslexia thing before, but with a G and a Y beside each other, my brain wants to move those around, and the ends and I don't even really know how to explain it, but when I look at that word, it makes my brain wrinkle the wrong way. Anyway, he was a general in later Zhou, one of these big dynasties, one of the few big dynasties that were in the south. And he is going to start off in the military and just decides that he can kind of run things better. And so he's going to usurp control of his military unit, and then he's going to kick out the existing ruler of later Zhou, and then he's going to convince his army to declare him emperor. And this happens in 960. That word is beyond any dyslexia. That's a freaking hard word for us. Well, I appreciate the sympathy there. Kuang Yin. I could say it if I'm not looking at it, which is really weird. So he's got himself an empire now, and it's not super big, but he's going to spend the next 16 years conquering a lot of territory. And when he takes over as emperor, he is going to establish a new dynasty that he calls the Song Dynasty. Takes your brain to the gym. Yeah, I like to break a mental sweat too. So he's going to set off to reunify China. And he does a pretty darn good job of it. He's going to fight a lot, both in the south and across the river systems into the north. He said the thing. And he's going to do a pretty good job of conquering. He's a very successful military leader. He's very intelligent. He listens well to his subordinates, right? Which is a remarkable quality for a leader, right? If you're going to pick good subordinates, you should listen to them. And he puts a lot of faith in his leaders that he picks and lets them do things and is rewarded by good work. And he's also really aware that there are all of these other warlords out there, right? If he were Microsoft, he would have called it Dynasty 1X. Yeah, or some junk like that. Right? China Dynasty 11, and he'll just, or 10, and he'll just skip 9, right? Dynasty 10, there's no 9th dynasty. It's 8, 8.5, 10, right? That's just the way that it goes. So, one of the things that he likes to do is make peace, which right off you're going, hey, that's a pretty novel idea, but how do you bring all these warlords into the mix? This is going to sound kind of crazy, but it works. He likes to meet with these warlords, especially these other kingdom leaders, or a couple of times with some of these other dynasts, and he goes, look, I want you to give me your territory. And they're like, no. And he's like, no, hear me out. I want to give you a giant chunk of money. I want to offer you a personal bodyguard. And I want to make sure that you live in a really swanky palace for the rest of your life. And I'm going to, in turn, promise that I won't kill you and that I won't kill anybody else in your family. And if you want to leave all of the stuff that I'm going to give you to your kid, do your thing. And a lot of people are like, you're full of crap, aren't you? And he's like, no, I'm for real. I'm for real. This is the deal, right? Sounds good to me, but I'm going to need food too. What's up, Tommy? Good to see you, man. Right? You need the can of energy drink because you just got plinked off by the guy that's on the other side of the hill and you can't see where they're shooting at you from, right? I watched Tommy play some PUBG yesterday. He's way better at it than I am. So, this works. He starts with some of the smaller warlords and makes them this deal. He's like, look, I'm giving you the Golden Parachute Warlord Edition. If you sign treaty with me and sign over your territory and your land to me and give me your military, I'm going to put you up for the rest of your life, and you're going to be in the swankiest of swanky situations. And a lot of people think, oh, you're full of crap. But he keeps his word. And some people are like, no, dude, for real, you should take him up on his offer. And this is actually how he gets a lot of his territory, because he recognizes, number one, that a lot of people are just really sick of fighting, because they had been doing that at this point for probably coming up on 60 years, right? About 54 years of civil war. And things were not looking that great. So a lot of people were like, hey, man, if I can make sure that I'm going to be taken care of, I really don't care about running all of this country, because, dude, I could retire and he's just going to put me up, and I don't have to do all the political stuff, and I don't have to worry about assassins coming to kill me when I'm sleeping. I can just live in a big palace and eat good food and have tons of money. That's great. That's great. 5-star reviews, right? He's got a perfect review on, what would that be? On, not Yelp, because that's mostly for, was it Screen Door? I can't remember the one where you rate professionals. Is it Angie? Glassdoor. That's it, Glassdoor. Yeah, he's got a 5-star review. I don't know about his love life. Well, he did have a lot of wives and had multiple kids, but that's a whole other thing. Warlord Danny Glover was too old for this shiv. Hey, that's great. That's great. So a song pays his debts. He does. And this actually gets a lot of people on his side. It's really remarkable. You tell the truth, you give people tons and tons of money, and you set them up for life, and they'll stop fighting with you. It makes perfect sense, right? What else is he going to do? So much stuff. He moves the capital up into the north. Now, traditionally speaking, the Chinese capitals had been kind of here in the middle. But recognizing that he was already from the south and had a lot of support from the south because he was Han Chinese, he realized that moving up into the north was actually a strategically important concept, because that means his presence is in the north, where there are disparate groups of people, and he has not just this idea of reunifying China, but he wants to spread Chinese culture, right? The stuff that had been kind of brewing and gestating down here for 40 or so years down in southern China, he wants to show this to the north, and he wants to to Sinify them, right? We'll use the modern word, which I really don't like, but it's what kind of happens here. The city that he chooses today is called Kaifeng, and it becomes the biggest city in China. It's got about 400,000 residents around this time, so it's a big old city in the ancient world. One of the things that he does that is particularly interesting is that he institutes a much broader concept of meritocracy into his government. And this is a direct response to the concept of, especially here in the north, there are a lot of people that aren't in the hereditary structure of Chinese nobility, right? And he recognizes that enforcing some really, really strict Chinese nobility requirements would essentially alienate a lot of these people that had come into the north and then set them right back on the path of war. But meritocracy means anybody that's qualified for this job can apply for this job. And he does really broadly expand the institutional system where people have to take tests to get jobs. This is something that the Tang Dynasty had done, but it was usually just for the kind of top level, what you might consider like federal jobs. But he's going to expand that to just about any political job is going to have some level of competency test. And you don't get to pass things down through heredity. Your kids are expected to do what they're going to do, and you want to educate your kids so that they can get the job. Hand in hand with that, he's really going to promote education. And this is going to be where his sort of plan to push Chinese culture is really going to get going, because his academies in China are going to be really big centers of learning, and he's going to like to have people kind of do things on Chinese way. But so this is sort of what you might, if you just look at it on the outside, it looks like he's kind of working crossways to himself. He wants people to get educated so that they can get involved in the Chinese system so that they can become more Chinese. That's his ultimate goal. But inside of these universities, he's actually going to allow for a lot of academic freedom. He's going to encourage people to investigate new stuff and to collect information from all over the world and find things that aren't sort of the old Chinese way of doing stuff. So it's a really, really cool way of approaching stuff. It's not forced re-education. And I know that is something that happens a lot today in China, especially since Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution and all of that stuff, where they literally rewrote Chinese history. That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is, I want you to be involved in my government. And I'm going to set the way that our government works. And I'm going to set the way that our government works on the model that I want. And it's going to be a very Chinese model. Now, the meritocracy thing is going to help. These tests that you're going to have to take are going to get you in the door. But the academies are going to make cool stuff. And they're going to make our country really, really technologically advanced, and they're going to get people qualified for these sort of things. And then by participating in the larger Chinese system, you will want to be more Chinese. So it's a very subtle kind of cultural influence here. He's not making anybody do anything. If you wanted to go do peasant stuff, you could go do peasant stuff. But if you wanted to get into the government, you kind of had to play by his rules. And his rules were fairly loose, but they still ended up getting you kind of towards what he wanted. Very well designed system. And it's the IKEA strategy, right? You give them an incentive to join in. You make them want to be like you, right? You go to IKEA for the meatballs, and then you end up with this bookshelf that you didn't really need. Because it's just what happens, right? Now, there's a little bit of interestingness that happens at the end of his life. He only rules for 16 years, but they're a very, very formative 16 years. So he's going to rule from 960 to 976. And he has 2 fully grown sons, but he's going to end up passing the throne to his brother, a guy named Taizong. And there's a bit of a scuttlebutt here. Some people think that Taizong had him murdered, but it's recorded in the history that he was still alive when he gave Taizong the nod to be emperor next. We don't necessarily know if there were shenanigans, but even some later Chinese historians suggest that there might have been some weirdness going on here. Whether or not we know for sure Taizong killed his brother, I don't think we can prove that one way or the other. It's just kind of interesting. Who doesn't need another bookshelf? I actually do need another bookshelf. I need a large bookshelf. Yeah, shenanigans, right? Enlightenment via indoctrination. Well, see, it wasn't even necessary indoctrination. It was just enlightenment via incentivizing, right? If you want to be in my government, you're going to have to follow these rules. And you really want to be in my government because my government's pretty friggin' cool. This is the we have way too many books chat. Dude, I have way too many books. I ordered 2 more books last night. They're coming in the mail. Do the modern Chinese people acknowledge him? You know what, Jamar? I don't actually know that, and that's a really great question. I'm gonna have to look that up. I can give you what I would suspect. I suspect that they do recognize him, but I also suspect that they have a very specific view of him, and I would bet that they don't pay as much attention to the fact that his meritocracy program allowed non-Chinese into the government. I would bet that they have edited that part pretty dramatically to say that he was all about working your way in and doing your part and being educated and fulfilling your role. So I bet they have a kind of a sanitized version of him that fits the modern communist model. But I don't know that for sure. That's a really, really great question, and I'm kind of itching to look that up now. But we don't necessarily have time. Anyway, ooh, I didn't even show you this. This is a map of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. Sorry, I forgot to show you that. That's from earlier. Oh, and I didn't show you this either. This is Taizu. Maddie, we're talking about this guy right here, Taizu, the first emperor of the Song dynasty. I'm just way behind on images. Also, welcome, Maddie. And Nogra, I've seen you in the chat. I didn't say hello, though. My bad. How's it going, man? Hope you're doing well. But now we're talking about... Oh, crud. I've just left all kinds of things. So many images I didn't show. Okay, so this particular image is of the capital city, Kaifeng, which was, at that time, not called Kaifeng. I believe it was called Beijing at that point in history, but anyway, it's modern day country or modern day city of Kaifeng, and we get this really great image of stuff that has been built in the city, specifically this really big fake lake where you can go paddle your boats out. You see this big houseboat, and you've got this big palatial structure on the other side of this like bridge, and yeah. In the neighborhood that's on a boat. Yeah, it's a big boat. But anyway, this was supposed to be, check out how cool we've made our capital city. He looks how I feel, old, hard, and trying to keep things together. I think he kind of looks like one of my buddies. Brittany, if you know the lawyer buddy of ours that has the craft beer store, I think there's some similarity here. If he had a fuller beard, a neighborhood on a boat, life goal. I now desire a complex house roaming on a gentle lake. Lumpy, I'll just throw this out there. You know, Minecraft goals. Just a thought. You could make it happen, right? Does he ride the chonky horse? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, I was trying to get to this guy, Taizong. So this is his brother, Taizong, who ends up in charge of the country after Taizu dies. Right? You can see the resemblance? Yeah. So, what's up with this guy? Well, he's going to continue the goal. We're going to conquer more land. We're going to bring China back together. But specifically, one of the things that Taizong is going to recognize is that he's never going to be able to militarily equal what his brother did. So what he needs to do is find some way to pass him, and how he figures to do that is culture. And historically, there are these written works that are called the Four Great Books of Song. Now, they have nothing to do with actually singing, but they are these four big Song Dynasty classic pieces of literature. And three of them are going to happen under his rule. There's the Taiping Guangji, which is this giant collection of Chinese folklore and mythology and fictional stories. There are over 7,000 stories recorded in this particular book. And it was completed under this particular period during or at one of these big academies. And he's actually going to commission 2 of the 4 books directly himself. One of them is called the Wenyuan Jinhua, right? Which is basically a giant collection of poetry. Rank 3 things. What's my qualifications? How good they are? The economy's not so great. Ranked by tacos? Well, none of them... Basil probably never had a taco. At least part of the economy is taco purchase. And I don't know if there are tacos in space, because that seems like it would probably be an issue on the International Space Station if you're eating tacos, because they're very crumbly. So by tacos, the economy is going to have to be 1, because it's going to have the most tacos. By default, space travel is probably going to have 2, because it's modern and the tacos exist. So there is a there is a chance that modern space people or people that have been to space will eat a taco, and then Basil's got to be at the end because he never had a taco. Good TV program named Tacos in Space. A dude in the 70s smuggled a sandwich onto this. Okay, well, there we go. So, I mean, maybe there are tacos in space. I don't know. I would have to rank it 2, though, because the possibility does exist, and the possibility did not exist in Basil's world. Think about the reach Basil had to get tacos if his people... Well, I mean, he might have had a pita, right? But... that's a piece of bread with, olives and lamb shoved into it. That's not necessarily a taco, right? Maybe Basil in another dimension is the inventor of tacos. Well, it's perhaps, but you didn't include interdimensional travel, right? Is it even a taco if it's not made of corn? That's a fair question, and I don't necessarily want to spend the next 45 minutes arguing the philosophy of tacos. What's up, Retheus? How's it going, my friend? Yeah, I was going to say, like, flour tortillas. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's a fair question. I just don't know if we have time to answer it. People get really picky about their tacos, right? And there are heated opinions, right, about what counts as a taco and what doesn't. As I recall, during this time, there was a drought that lasted around a year. One of the crops was devastated due to a lack of rain, perhaps rice. One of the farmers decided to take a piece of bamboo and drive it into the ground approximately 10 inches, and water flowed out the top of it. It was the first driven well in the world. Happened when technology began to advance rapidly in China. That's quite possible, Moose. I don't know the specific story myself, but I try very clearly to make it well known that I don't know everything. That sounds really interesting and quite possibly the case. I don't know if we could necessarily say that was the first driven well in the world. It seems like that might have been something that somebody else just randomly did, right? But it seems like it's a potential thing that would work at this time period. Yeah, because I mean we've been talking about moving water around for a while. I don't know if we could say that that's definitely the first one. That might be the origin of the folk story of it, though. Okay, so big book of stories, big book of poetry. There's the Taiping Yulan, which is this gigantic encyclopedia, which includes thousands and thousands of references of data that was commissioned by Taizong. So he's pushing the advancement of knowledge. And this, again, is 3 of the 4 big books. Around this time, he's also going to work with an astronomer named Zhang Sichun. And this is a really interesting diagram here, and it's kind of weird to look at, but this is an armillary sphere. And you're like, what the crap is all of this stuff then? Well, so the armillary sphere here is a device that is used to track the motion of things in space, right? And all of this stuff down here was a hydraulic device that Zhang Sishun arranged as a way to work on hydraulics. And specifically, it worked with mercury. And because mercury doesn't evaporate and you can set it to dripping, the mercury would move through all of this structure and it would move the pieces of the armillary sphere. So that's, it's crazy how people even figured out that stuff. If you asked me to build one of these now, I wouldn't even really know where to begin. But this is the kind of advances that are happening under Taizong. Another thing, he starts bringing in intellectual people from around the world, including people from the Arab world. Step 1, Google how to make that thing. Right. So he starts bringing in people from the Arab world. And if we remember contiguously, this is sort of the golden age of the Baghdad University, right? So he's bringing in people from that area. He's bringing in people from India, people from China, people from Korea, and he's putting all of these people into his university system, and things are just really advancing pretty rapidly. Yes, Arab world was still in a pretty big upswing. Now, we'll talk about them more in a few weeks, but it's a pretty big deal, right? He's going to start rebuilding temples, and specifically when we do rebuilding temples, they're going to focus on Confucian temples, and there's a reason for this, right? If you'll remember back when we were talking about the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, there was a lack of recognition to the concept of one emperor. Well, the mandate of heaven had always been a Confucian concept, right? That heaven has a role for everyone, and one person's role is to be the emperor. So when Taizong decides that he's going to start rebuilding the destroyed parts of the empire, he's going to start focusing on Confucian temples. And he does this to get the idea back out that he's in charge, right? So this is, again, sort of subtle social engineering where, yeah, we're going to come and rebuild the temples. And while we give some love to the Buddhist temples, we're going to focus on the Confucian temples because the priests there are going to tell people, you're supposed to follow the emperor. You're supposed to do what the emperor tells you to do. You're supposed to follow the rules of the government. And this, again, is kind of like it's putting the thumb on the scale, right? There are steps made to further political unification. Specifically, again, this big promotion of Southern Han Chinese culture, right? And when we push this idea out there, people are going to start wanting to be part of that. When the emperor throws a big party, he's going to dress a certain way and talk a certain way and act a certain way and promote certain things. And when you want to be in the club, you're going to start adopting the stuff from the club, right? We're going to get foreign relations expanding quite a bit. You're going to see advisors that come in from all over the world. You're going to see big treaties with lots of big nations in the region. And you're going to see a period of stability that is going to be almost the polar opposite of what was going on in the first half of the century, where everybody was in chaos and killing each other. By the time you look at the 970s and 980s and into the 990s, China is night and day different. And the biggest difference is that the Song dynasty has showed up, and they're not playing around. They are really working to rebuild China and push their vision of what China is supposed to be. And if we look at how much they conquered, by the time we get to the year 1000, they're actually going to have more of China than the Tang dynasty had at the beginning, because they're good at what they do. They're incredibly skilled. The leaders are very intelligent. They're very crafty. They're subtle. They can play both the carrot and the stick game. And the Song dynasty, when we get back around to them next century, is going to kick off what is really the first big renaissance of the world. And it's going to be incredible and remarkable. They fought people around them, and both emperors, Taizu and Taizong, are going to conquer territory around them. Taizu is going to take over much more territory than Taizong does. Taizong does get some stuff down here in the southern part of China. In the 970s, there are quite a few wars down here in the south, and by the very end of Taizu's reign, he doesn't live all the way through to year 1000, but at the very end of Taizong's reign, there's going to be some fighting up here with the Liao dynasty. But most of the time, the Song dynasty is going to be very stable and is going to be very, very solid. But this is a big and powerful dynasty, and I really, really like them. I really sort of wish we could just go ahead and... What the heck happened right there? Ugh. That was really weird. And it's still kind of catched. Or caught. Catched? What the devil am I saying? Let me get some water. How about that? There we go. Yeah, sand from the Sahara. It just gets on the wind. Anyway, what I was trying to say is I really sort of wish that I could roll right on into talking about the next century of China, because it's really fascinating stuff. Really, really fascinating stuff. So that, though, is all that I had planned for the night. And it has miraculously made it all the way through, despite the internet being such a jerk at the beginning of the stream. But I guess the universe decided that it was a good thing to have a little bit of knowledge thrown out into the world. So we'll give everybody a happy. And if anybody has any questions about anything, now would be a good time to ask. Otherwise, we'll see who we can do a raid into or onto. To whom shall we raid? Comcast will strike again. Perhaps so. It'll be right here at the end, and we'll be just about done, and then it'll cut out on us, right? That would be something Comcast would do, right? Do. Let's see who's streaming. Hey, you can't shoot your leg. Crazy cat.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
Moose says, what's in the news? Anything of interest? And Brittany says, what's in the news? Ecuador. But Matt, thank you so much for that subscription. Welcome in. Hope that you're having a good one. Much appreciated, my friend. What do you think China pushing the currency? What do you think China pushing the currency been the global? I don't get you, JMR. Can you help me understand that? My brain has dropped all of the words. All right. So Moose says anything of interest, and then Brittany says Ecuador. Let me talk about Ecuador, and then I'll talk about something else. What's going on in Ecuador? Okay, well, there's been a lot of protests in Ecuador, specifically involving the president, whose name is Lasso. And he has been charged with some corruption issues, specifically dealing with how the companies involved in some trading at a port have done some business. And it looks like he may have intervened to get some people that are on his side some better deals. It's messy, and the investigation hasn't been allowed to happen because he's basically shut it down. So there have been a lot of protests for him to resign, and the protest had grown quite loud, and it looked like yesterday he was about to face an impeachment proceeding, which he did not want to do because he was probably going to end up impeached, right? So what he decided to do was pull this really weird political maneuver where he dissolved Parliament. He called for snap elections, which he can do. It's a legal maneuver. But really what this did was it suspended any acts of Parliament until the next Parliament can be elected, which, given the arrangement of a new last-minute election, could take 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, right? So he bought himself quite a bit of time by getting rid of Parliament, keeping them from being able to impeach him, and then kicking the can down the road. Now, what's really interesting is this has actually brought more heat onto him, and the calls for him to resign have now become even louder. And there was a ton of protesting yesterday and today. So that particular situation is getting nasty. And there have been some protests that have gotten out of hand, and there have been some instances where police have responded rather heavy-handedly, and there's worry that because of the instability of the central government, that there's going to be potential rioting and looting and stuff like that, which is not outside of the possibility. So he's not gone yet, but a lot of people really want him gone. So there's what's going on in Ecuador. First time chat. So first time chat, first time sub. Matt, that's great. I am honored that I have apparently done a rather impressive job. Like the first time that you're in, you're like, I'm going to subscribe to this guy. Please feel free to get involved however you want to. We're really laid back here. No questions really off the table. We talk about just about anything. I like to do my best to try to get information out into the world. But thanks so much, man. It wasn't me. I appreciate that, Moose. It was the crowd, right? It was the chonky horse. What do I think about China pushing the yuan to be the global currency? Well, that's just another part of their attempts at legitimizing themselves as a global economic power, right? The yuan is not a stable currency and should not be a currency of international exchange. The fact that they bullied everybody into accepting it was something that was directly related to their purchasing power in the market. But we all know that the Chinese manipulate their currency. But to be fair, America manipulates its currency. It doesn't do it to the brash degree that the Chinese do, but what is quantitative easing that happened for about a decade, if not manipulating our currency? Right? It's just the way that it goes. But China's way shiftier and way shadier about the yuan than America is about the dollar. We will at least admit that we're manipulating the dollar. China goes, we're not manipulating the yuan, and you're like, you're totally manipulating the yuan. You're like, no, we're not. We're really, really not. And like, yes, you are. Okay, what else is going on in the world? We talked about Imran Khan last time. We talked about what else did we talk about last time? I can't remember what all we talked about. Oh, we talked about Ukraine and hypersonic missiles last time. Let's talk about Syria. That'll be this will be fulfilling Moose's whatever I want to. So Syria has been allowed back into the Arab League of countries. And while this might not seem like that big of a deal, it actually is. Syria got kicked out back after the Arab Spring, mostly for Bashar al-Assad being a warlord that killed his own people. He's still killing his own people, and he's still effectively a warlord. He's not holding actual legitimate political power. He's holding power because he's got a military that's killing everybody faster than they can kill him. Let's just be honest about it. Syria is a war-torn country that has seen millions of people fleeing the country to try to get away from all this stuff, and tens of thousands of people dying, if not hundreds of thousands of people dying. But there has been a weird push lately by the Saudis to make all of the Arab countries be happy with each other again. And to a certain extent, this is because the Saudis want to be the head of the Arab world. And it's also because China is trying to get involved in the Arab world. China would love to be in a position where they are the new peacekeepers that people turn to help them alleviate arguments between their countries. And having Syria hanging outside the Arab League of Nations was asking for China to get involved in Syria. And this was already starting to sort of look like it was going to happen. China sent a lot of aid to Syria after a lot of these big earthquakes that happened. So the same earthquakes that hit Turkey's southeastern corner wrecked Syria as well, because Syria's northern border butts right up next to Turkey's southeastern border. So China had already sent a lot of aid and was making overtures. And the Saudis decided, no, we need to get Syria back in the loop. So they let Bashar al-Assad back in, and this has just further legitimized his reign. And it's ultimately sort of a three-dimensional chess game against China. It's not necessarily everybody in the Arab world liking Bashar al-Assad. But that's what we got, right? Who wouldn't want to be in an economic club with Russia, Venezuela, Argentina, Malaysia, and Brazil? Well, I'd rather be in a club than no club, if we're just really talking about it, right? So, rather be in a club than no club. Okie dokie. Where are we going to go? Where have we not raided in a while? It's about time to do a raid. It's about time to do a raid. What even is its hat group? I'm sorry, Maddie. My brain is not putting things together. Could you help me again there? I'm so sorry. I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me. I wouldn't dare join any club that would have someone like me as a member. That's the group of countries talking about redenominating the yuan. Oh, I see. I got you. Thanks, John Collector. Now I'm really lost. I got nothing. Maddie. I'm so sorry. How's the Sotheby going? We've got... I called it. We've got this much of the Sotheby. And I've got some of the arms. Oh, I see. Okay. I gotcha. I'm with you now. Okay, I've called up. Thank you. No. You're saying it the right way, and my brain was not recognizing that was an anagram, and I was just like, Vramb? Like, is this a Polish word that I don't know? I'm sorry. I'm with you now. Not anagram, acronym. Okay. Yeah, I Oh man. Okay. So these acronyms are groups of countries that were widely seen as what we might call movers and shakers in the next round of economic growth, right? So if we go back to the late 90s and early 2000s, it was BRIC, right, which is Brazil and Russia and India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. The BRICS countries. These were the ones that were going to be the movers and the shakers in the next round of economic change. And now there's a new one, which is VRAM, which is the countries that Junk Collector mentioned that are going to potentially talk about adopting the yuan as the standard of exchange instead of the dollar. And India is... Narendra Modi is a horrible person and is causing needless suffering inside of his country because of his idiotic policies. And I do not support him or his government, which is okay because I guess I don't live in India, but he's a pretty horrible dude and doesn't really have redeeming qualities. So there we go. Tell me what you really feel, Shane. You know, Erky Dirk. Where is we going to go raid? Where have we not raided? I need to keep the list again because I can't remember where we have raided and where we haven't raided recently. Let's see where we're going to go. Okay, let's go raid Damage because he's drawing some kind of weird, like, angry Pikachu thing. I have no idea what this thing is. We raided Melissa about 2 weeks ago, so I try to spread the love around. I don't think we've rated Damage in about a month and a half or so. It's been a little while since we've rated Damage. I need to... well, I used to keep an actual list of who we've rated, but we have rated Melissa more recently than we have rated Damage, if that makes any sense. Yeah, the past couple of years, right? Didn't India and China have a recent border dispute? Yes, they did. Along can I do this quickly? Over here in borders. Yeah, see this red line? They dispute that. So it's not in Kashmir. It's the Arunachal Pradesh. That's where the current border stuff is going on. India sold part of Kashmir. Anyway, we got to go. See everybody. Take it easy. Have a good one.